Are we going live? So very good evening to one and all present, and welcome to a brand new episode of VUTV by Vijayabhumi. As you know, we try to bring you something special and exciting every month. And this month we have decided to do a very exciting college admissions edit. As we all know, a lot of students are right now making that decision that, what they should be doing next, which university they should be going to. A lot of the students who are right now just have recently graduated to grade 12. They're also wondering, in all this uncertainty, what are the sort of decisions that they must make. So we thought that, why don't we bring to you all the leading career counselors of India today who are engaging with students, so many students on a daily basis, and understand from them that how are they guiding their students, what is the process that they're following. There's so many myths around applying, especially, if we talk about college admissions abroad, which we're going to be focusing on today. There's so many myths about, SAT, test prep strategy. There's so many myths around, what should be going into your profile. You have kids who are doing all things, people keep pressurizing them that, hey, you should be getting into music also, you should be try theater also, you must write also, you must get into robotics also. So we're going to be unpacking this with our counselor who's joining us today. And I'm so happy to introduce her because I think what she has done during the pandemic has been really, really remarkable because she ended up starting her venture during the pandemic. And she has been counseling students during the pandemic, which I think is a remarkable achievement and feat in itself. I'm joined today by Ms. Sanskriti Jhunjhunwala, who's the founder of Eduworks. Thank you so much, Sanskriti, for joining me today. I'm so excited to have you and talk to you about navigating college admissions, especially in Europe and Southeast Asia, because you've had your students who have gone to very good, noteworthy universities of both these regions. So I'm sure that you can add so much from your experience working with students, as well as the fact that you yourself have studied abroad. I think there's a lot that can come from your personal and professional experience in this conversation today.
Thank you, Kritika, for having me. I'm really excited to speak to you and to all the viewers. So, please let me know any questions from the audience. Also, I'm happy to entertain.
Super. So I'm sure that all my audience members will have a lot of questions. To all my audience members, you know the drill already. Please make sure you send us a lot of your questions. We are taking note of your questions on our social media platforms as well. And we make sure we're going to include that in our conversation with Sanskriti today. So let's jump right into the conversation. So Sanskriti, when a student comes to Eduworks, how do you first guide students? I mean, the first big decision is that, okay, is it a good idea to pursue your undergrad education abroad, or is it a good idea to pursue your undergrad education in India? That's step one. Step two, if you zero in that, this student is a good candidate and a good fit for pursuing higher education abroad, how do you figure out that which is the country which would be, best suited to the child and their interests? So if you can just understand a little bit of the process from you.
So honestly speaking, I think studying in India and studying abroad are both great options. Anyone who says that, India is not good enough, I don't agree with that. I think India has some really good options for a variety of subjects. My main issue with Indian admissions, and I think that this is something that a lot of students face as well, is that it's primarily reliant on board exams and or entrance exams. So basically what happens then is that your performance on a particular day ends up being very, very important. Versus when you're applying abroad, it allows you to present a more holistic picture of yourself, over 4 years of your high school. So for example, for the US, they see all of your exams, like including your internal exams from 9 to 12. For someone like the UK, like for the country, like for countries like the UK or Europe, they look at your class 10 board exams, they look at your predicted scores, they look at a bunch of things. So yes, even though it is still academically oriented, at least you are able to show a little bit more of yourself rather than your performance just during the boards, right? So, and I think this is one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people decide to apply abroad as well, because they feel that they don't want to leave it to chance of how they perform on that one day. And applying abroad is a good way to kind of, open up your options and go get into a good college without having to rely on that one day. Other reasons, why people decide to apply abroad can be the style of education, which is fairly different between India and abroad, exposure, wanting to work abroad after you're done, and also better facilities in many cases, unfortunately, because a lot of the colleges in India, while academically they're great, some of them can be a little lacking in terms of the facilities because they have to be affordable, right, to a larger chunk of the population. So that those are some of the main reasons. Once we've zeroed in on applying abroad, I think a lot of what I do at least is spend a lot of time getting to know students personally. And whether you're applying to the US, whether you're applying to UK or Singapore, there is a pretty big disparity in the way that students are taught. The US, for example, is super fluid, especially for the first 2 years. So for students who are not very sure about which country they like, what majors they want to do, which countries they want to do, the US is a very good option because it's an amalgam of a lot of things, and it gives you the opportunity to experiment and get to know yourself before you take that final decision of this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. For students who are very sure about what they want and they don't want to experiment a lot with other things, then the UK is a great option, right? Because you apply directly to one course, you stick to that course, you go into a great depth when it comes to that course. Singapore, there's a mix. So if you're looking at Singapore Management University, they follow the US system of education, which means they're a lot more flexible. But if you look at, say, the National University of Singapore, they follow more the India, UK, that system where you apply directly to the course and you stick to the course. So Singapore, I feel, is a very good, like option for students of both types. They also have a very good liberal arts college now, Yale and US. So they've managed to bring both worlds together and at a place that's so close to India. So in terms of distance, that Singapore ends up being a pretty good option for people who don't want to go too far.
I think those are some excellent points you have made there, Sanskriti. I think definitely the fact, and I think this is where I think a lot of Indian universities should take out a leaf from the book of the admission processes that we have for foreign universities, which is the fact that they're more holistic. Right? I mean, in India, we're just kind of really centered around how you do on a particular day, during a competitive exam or in your board exam, and that's kind of the deciding factor. Also, I think the fact that how very beautifully and clearly you've kind of articulated the fact that how do you make a decision between the different countries that you have, which are popular destinations for pursuing your higher education. So in US, like you said very clearly, it's more of a liberal arts framework. So there's more flexibility, works excellently well for somebody who's still sort of navigating the path and trying to figure out what they really want to do. UK, absolutely right, that it's slightly more rigid and more akin to the system that we have in India, where you need to be slightly more decided about what is the sort of direction that you're going to take. And I think Singapore, you're absolutely right, is emerging as a great option for Indian students. I mean, the fact that it's giving you the best of both worlds. And I think definitely the distance part of it plays a very good role in it. And I also think safety is another thing that Singapore is associated with, that generally I see parents are very comfortable with sending their students, their children to Singapore because of the fact that it's really safe and it works out really well, especially for people who have daughters. I mean, safety is always a big concern at the back of their mind. So Singapore works out as a great option. So now that we've done the first part of the process, now the second part that I would come to is that obviously every university you have like detailed checklists, because I'm sure when you work with your students, because every university is looking for something different in their children who they want to take in their intake. But if I had to ask you that once this decision has been taken, that okay, we're going to zero in on probably, we're looking at UK and we're looking at Singapore. So what would a macro checklist look like in terms of, what are the major landmarks or milestones that you definitely need to cover in your checklist that you need to take off to ensure that, you have a good application to UK universities as well as Singapore universities?
So like I said, I mean, academics are the single most important thing. Whichever country you're applying to, this is blanket, like, your grades are going to be the most important, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on the student. So I think the first thing that I want students to make sure that they have down is their transcripts. They need to have their transcripts attested and ready at a moment's notice, because whichever, like the deadlines are all different, right? So you need to keep uploading it, you need to have it ready. Other very important requirements that we ensure that students take care of well in advance are securing letters of recommendation from their teachers, predicted grades from their schools as well, because all of those things take a little while to get done. You can't go to a teacher, at the last second and be like, you need to write me a letter of recommendation and I need it in a week, because the teacher's not going to be able to do it. So we make sure we ask them to ask their teachers months in advance. Then after that, we talk about making sure the tests are ready, like getting all their tests done. So we create a timeline with, for example, IELTS or TOEFL if that's required, SAT if that's required, GMAT in the case of the master's students. So every country, every course has different kind of tests that are needed. So we make sure that we timeline and schedule all of those things. We then work on building a CV, because in a lot of colleges, they do ask for a proper resume that you submit. Even if you don't, I personally, this is my recommendation to all students that, if you're reaching out to an admissions officer, even via email or attending a college fair, if you go up to them with a resume in hand, you just set a more long lasting impression and they have something to remember you later to make that connection if need be. After the CV, we then make a custom college list, because even within each country, I think, which subject each college is good for. And like I gave you the example of Singapore, right? SMU, their approach is so different from NUS. So, you make the list of colleges based on the student. And post that, we then work on essays, statements of purpose, interview preparation, and all of those things. So, yeah, that's the basic process.
So I think that's a pretty exhaustive list, a macro checklist that you've shared with all our viewers. The fact that, first things, academics, I think is very important. That needs to be looked into. Second, the letters of recommendation, very important. Like the teachers, principals, or anybody you work with, I think, who can sort of give a good idea to the university, the prospective university that you're applying to, to get a good insight into what, what sort of a person you are and your character. Then the standardized tests, which are extremely important, very, very important. And building a profile, I think, you've shared a great tip here that, even when you're interacting with the college admissions officer or anybody, because you interact with them on multiple forums, right? I mean, schools also conduct university fairs nowadays. I mean, students are also attending university fairs that parents enroll them for. And, we noticed that, you end up seeing a lot of like similar faces from the admissions officers. So it's always a good idea if you, share your CV with them. It really kind of builds a good relationship. So I think it's a very good tip for all the students and parents who are joining us here, that you must definitely look into this. Now, this is the third question that I've come to, is something that I think, when we released the topic on social media, was something that, we got quite a bit, because there's a lot of, I think, confusion that people have. Like with the US, I think it's very easily that they associate the standardized test to be the SAT or the ACT. But obviously with Europe and especially the Southeast Asian countries, like Hong Kong or Singapore, everybody wants to understand that what are the sort of standardized tests that one needs to go for, and is there something like if it's SAT, then is there any other alternative? Does ACT play any role in it? So what are the kind of standardized tests that students need to look into? Like you did talk about the fact that TOEFL might be important for UK universities. So if you can just kind of broadly map out what are the standardized tests that we look at.
So the basic standardized tests are SAT and ACT. So they so basically, if I am to categorize it, this is, say, an aptitude test kind of a test, like it tests your fundamentals to a large extent. Then your TOEFL, your IELTS, and all of those things, those are just tests of English language. So those are given by us. So let's clear that out first, because those are, the more basic tests. TOEFL, IELTS pretty much will be required by any country that you're applying to from India, because India is not classified as an English-speaking, like native English-speaking country. That being said, a lot of colleges do grant you an exemption from the test if you can prove that your entire education has been in English and you've given exams in English, etc. Because the only thing they're trying to gauge out of IELTS and TOEFL is whether or not you'll be able to understand if the language of instruction is English, whether you'll be able to give exams and write papers in English. So that's one side of it. The other side, which is SAT and ACT, tests your level of like English and maths, which is basically your most fundamental subjects. SAT and ACT, actually, you don't have to take both. I know that this is a question that a lot of people do ask, that do I need to take both SAT and ACT? The answer is no. The best way to go about it is to take a diagnostic test for both and see which one you find better and which one you do better in as well. So, for example, ACT is known to be a little bit more straightforward than the SAT in terms of their English section. They say that the passages are a little bit more straightforward, but ACT has its own challenges, like they have a higher number of questions and they also have an inclination towards math and science. So for people who are not so strong with math and science, maybe SAT might be a better idea. But of course, this is just a very, very high level generalization that I'm giving you. Personally, I think that SAT strategy differs quite a bit from child to child. So I am not a big believer in the big size tuitions for SATs. Since it tests your fundamental concepts, you need to really go dig to the base of the child and strengthen those concepts. So each child will need that personalized attention to really be able to see a jump in their SAT scores. It's not one of those tests where there's a set syllabus, which you can just kind of learn it and you can go. It is a very conceptual syllabus, so you need to be able to understand those concepts and apply them. It's also very, very possible, I think, to study it on your own, depending on your starting level and how self-motivated you are. If you know you're not going to be able to do it yourself, then of course tuition makes sense. But if you can, there's actually a lot of resources and books. Like Khan Academy is a great resource if you want to study on your own. There's also no set target score. I think a good thumb rule is if there are certain colleges that you want to apply to, pretty much all of them will publish the median SAT score range and ACT score range on the website of their accepted class. So if you fall somewhere in that range, you're perfectly fine. Another thing is, it's always a good idea to practice a lot on your own in terms of the vocabulary lists and things like that, because a lot of SAT and ACT is actually understanding the format. If you're able to understand the format well, then there's no reason why you should not do well on the test. Also, another thing is that we are on the Eduworks' social media page. We actually did a pretty extensive comparison between SAT and ACT very recently. So if someone wants to check it out, our Instagram is a great resource to see.
Wow, that's great. I think, actually, Sanskriti, have really managed to unpack a lot of the doubts that people have on these standardized tests. Especially the ACT, the SAT and the ACT, because we see that you're absolutely right. There's a lot of confusion that people have. They think it's a good idea to do both, thinking that jitna zyada you do, you're likely to have a better impression, which is clearly not the case, right? And I think even what you said about preparation, I mean, it's a complete, like, coaching is a different jungle altogether out there, and it's very easy for one to for people to play on your insecurities and be like, no, you have to go through coaching. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we know so many people around us also who have successfully prepared at home and done really well on these standardized tests. And, if you're self-motivated and driven and, if you probably have put a good schedule to it of how you want to prepare, then I definitely think that, you're right, that, this is something that can be easily managed at home. And to all our viewers and parents joining us, please do check out the page of Eduworks, because I think this will really help you clarify a lot of the misconceptions we have about these standardized tests. And in fact, if you have doubts, you must get in touch with them. I'm sure at the end of it, Sanskriti will leave some contact details. So, make sure you do get in touch with them if you still have doubts after that, so that, you can actually navigate through this entire process better. Now, the fourth question I'd like to talk to you about is, and this is again this was a lot of feedback that we got from students, which is that, how do you prepare your list that you have, that you have in mind for, like, sort of zeroing in your dream university and your safety net schools? Again, like, there's really a plethora of options out there. So how do you sort of zero in on the list? How many schools you should have as, probably as your dream school? Should it just be one or probably more than one? Your safety net schools, how many schools you're looking at? Because like we discussed, right, each university, each college is very unique, which will require some sort of customization that you need to do in terms of your applications. So what's a good number to have, and how is a parameter, like what's a good parameter for you to arrive at this list?
So firstly, I think setting expectations is a pretty big part of my job. I'm sure that if given a choice, most students would want to ideally go to the top 10 elite schools that we all hear of in India. But the truth is that, those aren't the only good universities out there. And I think it's also my job to educate not just the student, but also the families that come to me about the fact that yes, just because you haven't heard of a university doesn't mean that it's not as good. I mean, personally, the university I went to, I think a lot of people did not hear of it, but I chose it over a lot of other universities that people in India are like, oh, okay, so this one. And I've actually had people ask me, oh, why would you go to this college over that one? Like it makes no sense. But I had my own reasoning and I did a lot of research before I made that decision. So similarly, I always tell the families that I'm working with that it's very important to build a balanced list, which includes dream colleges, target colleges, and safety colleges. So one big thing, as soon as anyone hears safety school, they automatically have, a negative reaction to it. But a safety school doesn't actually mean a subpar school. It has to be a school that the student is happy to go to. Even every level in your college list has to be colleges that the student is happy to go to. So it just means that a safety school is a good school, but the entry standards are a little lower. Maybe because they're not as well known or whatever it is, but just that the entry standards are a little bit lower. So, it's very, very important, I feel, to include safety schools that you would like to go to. Second thing is that I always think that, if there's a school that the student absolutely loves, even if it seems completely unrealistic, we should definitely apply. There's always that 0.5% chance, that maybe something clicks. And if not, the worst that can happen is that you get rejected. But at least the student isn't looking back at the process with regret or a what if. And it's very important not to have that. Because once you go to a college, you want to make sure that you gave your best shot to all of your options and this was your best one, because then you're entering college with the right mindset. So I personally think that if you're looking at the US, a good number of colleges to apply to would be 8 to 10. So maybe two safety 2 to 3 dream schools, 2 to 3 target schools, and then 2 safety schools. In the case of the UK, actually, UCAS sets a limit of 5 on you. So there's not much I can do in that case. So it has to be, usually we break it up into 1 to 2 dream schools, about 2 target schools, and then 1 to 2 safety schools, depending on how the student likes to go. Also, I think UK admissions are a little bit easier to kind of predict. The US, just because, they see so many things, it just becomes harder to predict what is actually going to be a safety and what is actually not going to be. So that's why it's always better to include 1 safety school extra if you're applying to the US. That's what I would say. But yeah, I think in general, building a balanced college list is so important. I really can't stress on the importance enough.
No, I think Sanskriti here again. I think you managed to unravel this mystery quite a bit. Because what I generally see when I speak to a lot of students who are in this sort of situation, you see that they're going crazy to applying like to multiple schools. So I think what you've given is a good benchmark. The fact that for US schools you look at like 10, and in UK where you have a category of 5. Southeast Asian, countries. I think we all know what are like the universities that you'd want to check out. So it's it's a narrower list. And I think again, it's this positive thing that you've attached to it. You're absolutely right. Whenever people think of safety schools, and if for whatever reason the child gets into the safety school and probably does not make it to the dream or target schools, because as we all know, there are a lot of factors that go into it. Suddenly you feel that everybody's face falls down. That there is that unfortunate stigma attached to it, that this is like the third category altogether.
Mhm.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, a good lens of looking at it is when you're devising your list. I mean, if you look at it from this lens, then no, these 10 schools are schools that I'm going to be happy if I am to get through them and get enrolled in these universities. Then I think this will really change the outlook with which parents and students actually approach this entire process. So I think that's a good spin that you've given to this entire list, dilemma that students and parents go through during this particular time. So this was another question that I see, we picked up from YouTube while we've been streaming the session. Is this that, so, I've had different variations of this question being asked to me, that it's, for some reason, when we talk of higher education, it's always US, which is like sort of, on the top of everybody's mind, especially foreign education. It's very unfortunate that UK and, like Southeast Asian countries, don't sort of, are not the first ones that come to your mind. So do you think, like, as a person who's worked with so many students, you have seen the experience of students going there and what they've been doing after, plus you yourself have also been through it. So do you really think there is a difference in the quality of education that is there between these three nations? And do you think that, one is above the other?
So, okay, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I'm a huge fan of the US system of education. I've actually studied in both the US and the UK. I did my main undergrad from the US, but I did 2 semesters in the UK as well. So, I got a pretty good sense of both. And what I found is that the US system is a lot more application based. But also, I think that said, every system has its own advantages and disadvantages. So what I appreciated about the US is actually something that a lot of people don't prefer about it. They feel that they expect students to be a little too analytical too early in life, which might be true, but I really enjoyed, having to analyze. So another thing is that the US system is broader. You learn multiple disciplines because of the way that the requirements are structured at the colleges. And it also includes a lot of regular testing, and it's very writing intensive. So again, all of these things which I look at as advantages may not be advantages for other people. Um, because now, for example, European and Asian universities, they value independence, right? They don't test as regularly because they believe that students should be studying regularly on their own anyway. They shouldn't be needing to be tested to keep them on their feet, which of course is also, I think, a pretty good value to kind of follow, right? To trust the student. Um, Another thing is that they also let you jump right into your area of interest without having to study this wide range of subjects, which you may or may not think is relevant. So the most important thing, I think, is context in terms of making the decision of whether you should go to the US or Europe or Asia, because what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, there really is no black and white in this situation. It's very, very different for each student. Like, I think for a lot of kids, they actually don't want to be studying multiple things. If they know they want to study math, they just want to study math. They don't want to waste time studying a little bit of history and economics with that. But for someone like me, I was interested in so many subjects and I wasn't ready to let it go. Like, I wasn't ready to let the other subjects go just because I wanted to study economics. So the US that way gave me an outlet to satisfy, yes, the economic side of it, but also the history buff side of my personality, and the English loving side of my personality. I could take classes in all of those. I didn't have to major in it, but I could take those classes anyway, right? So I could stay in touch. But a lot of students, their favorite part of getting out of school is leaving behind those additional subjects that they don't like. So, it's a very personal choice, I would say.
I think what you said is absolutely right here, that it is very student specific and individual specific to what dreams, aspirations, and interests you have. Like, there are a lot of students who want to experiment, who have diverse interests, multiple interests. They are interested, like, in a combination, like, Greek literature, as well as they're interested in engineering. So that is something that would be available to them in a system like US. But there are some students who are, again, like very, like, very clear on a particular discipline, that if they want to do management, they only want to do management, or if they want to pursue like pure sciences, then they just want to do pure sciences. So definitely, I think, like you had shared earlier, that depending on the general nature of the education systems of these countries, I mean, we have to, I think parents and students have to sit and introspect and sort of understand that what is their expectation that they like from their higher education, and what is the sort of exposure they'd want. And I think that's what helps them, that's what would help them realize that what would be the right pick for them. And that's where I think, I mean, the work that you guys are doing is great because, like you said initially, you started that, a lot of your work is just trying to work with the families and the students to figure out what do they want and what kind of people they are. I mean, what are their sort of aspirations to sort of align their choices of universities with the kind of people that they are. And this is what we talk about, right? Fitment. So I think this is really important and this is critical. And I would actually urge parents and students who are watching this conversation, even if you're going to be applying in India, I think the criteria of fitment is something which is very less talked about in India, but is actually very important to ensure that you're in the right place and ensure that you get the best. You should get exactly what you want and what you want to get out of your higher education, because it's a very big decision of your life. Right. So I think this is something that, I urge all students and parents to sort of look into, that just be sure. And in case if this is something you can't navigate with yourself, I mean, you have people like Sanskriti who are here to just help you with this. Right. And to help you understand yourself better. And nobody better than her who can do this for you because she's gone through the process herself. Right. So now this brings me to my last question. And I think this is probably, this question would be a session in itself, is what I feel. But because we don't have a liberty to do that, again, this is something that had been touched upon quite a bit, when we circulated the topic on social media, which is applications.
Okay.
Right. I'm sure you must be going through this yourself, from what you must be hearing from incidents that your students are narrating, from what parents are telling you. It's really like, I feel that now with this access to information, sometimes there's a lot of misinformation that's also being spread. I see that, right now, while it's great that parents are a lot more aware than probably what our parents were, but suddenly you see that there's this mad race that, parents have got into, like, with kids, as young as in grade 5, grade 6, they're pushing the kids to, start their own ventures, get into entrepreneurship. There are robotic classes that are going on side by side. They're encouraging them to go into science Olympiad, math Olympiad, take up a sport, take up, some performing arts. And the idea largely is this, right? I mean, parents have become more aspirational and they just want that, their children are putting the best foot forward in terms of their applications. But I want to understand from you that what is it that's important? Like, do you say that, this thing of, where we do 10 things, is that what's important? Or is it like quality over quantity that, sort of, resonates more with admission officers? So how do you sort of help your students navigate through this situation? And also that, and B, what I would like to know from you is that, how do you help your students in, like, what are the macro points you give them when they're sort of in that thing where they're ideating about their applications? So how do you tell them, how do you motivate them to put themselves out there? Because these things are kind of intertwined. Because at the end of the day, through these activities, the person's able to make out that what sort of a person you are, what are you passionate about. So how do you help them streamline what are the kind of activities they should choose? And B, once they have chosen those activities, how do you sort of encourage them to put it into their application and represent who they are?
So actually, I am so glad you asked me this question, because this is exactly the kind of thing that leads students to feeling so overburdened and so anxious for, the entire period, which can be like 2 to 3 years even, and that's a really long time to stress your child out. It's also one of the biggest reasons why I actually got into this work, because when I was applying, and I realized through my family, friends, and other cousins, etc., who I was helping, that what was happening is that people like me don't actually listen to what the student wants. They have their own checklist, which they follow. That okay, launch a startup, engage in community service, pick up a sport, pick up one art form, and it's just like one checklist which every student is told to follow, and that's it. Like they're like, okay, this is the mantra, just do this, and you will be in. And I am the exact opposite. I completely don't believe in this one size fits all approach that so many people have started taking. So, to kind of make sure that this doesn't happen to the students who are under me, I spend the first part of my process on getting to know the student through a career exploration module. So, yes, it kind of, so I mean, this is one of the other main tenets, I think I would say, of my idea behind this, is that there is no sort of career exploration built into our system of education in India in high school. When I went to college, a lot of the people who came from other parts of the world, they actually already had a basic idea, at least, of the direction in which they wanted their life to go. For us, all we knew was ki, yes, I want to study economics, or yes, I want to study business, or I want to study engineering. But what do I want to do after that? Nobody had a clue, So I spent the first 2 years letting go of opportunities which would have been so helpful for me now, which I realized, of course, in retrospect. So that's why I start with career exploration, which includes a mind map. So what happens in the mind map is that I understand their strengths, their weaknesses, their areas of interest, and just them in general a lot better. Then once I know this, I use this itself to, like, this information to help them build their profile. And this profile building is actually why they're told to launch the startup or do community service, etc. In my case, I'll only ask the student to engage in community service or take up a sport if they're passionate about it. It's not a checklist, and every student is different. So that's why I personally work with every student individually to help them grasp their own individuality. They don't have to conform to a checklist. They need to just understand what they like and what they're good at. I know it seems so stupid that I am helping them understand what they like, but sometimes it's actually not, they're not sure what they like. So, just to get them the right opportunities and the right experiences for them to figure out what they like, be it internships, be it research papers, be it community service. I'm not saying community service or a sport or anything is wrong, but it should only be done if the student is passionate about it and if the student actually wants to do it. Otherwise, if you think about it, these college admissions officers, they go through like thousands of applications a day. They can see through way more than we can ever imagine. So if a student is engaged in an activity just to pad up their CV for college, you can bet that the officer knows it's just for their benefit rather than actual effort on the part of the student. And that gives off a very negative impression of your student. So from every way, I feel it's so important to kind of get to know the student, to understand their passions and employ those passions for their profile, rather than creating a list and being like, look, you need to just do this and just follow what I'm saying, and that's it. So honestly, for any parent who's actually watching, please don't force your kid to do just everything on this list. Take the time to find out the three things that they might like, and allow them to invest their time in those three things, because definitely, like you asked me, quality is way more important than quantity in my eyes, and also according to all the admissions officers I've spoken to so far.
No, I think, thank you so much because, for saying that, because I think you're absolutely right. We end up overburdening our children so much. We don't realize that we're taking away the childhood from them, where when we try to push them to all these classes, I mean, they already have school, then they are going to all these classes, and then there's all that pressure that comes from all these activities. Then, they don't actually get that time to self-discover. So a big, I think, question that we need to ask ourselves is, why are our kids confused? Our kids are also confused because we don't give them time to reflect. We don't give them time to introspect. We don't give them time for them to get to know themselves better. I mean, probably if they have that time, they'd be able to be in a better position where they know that, okay, what are my strengths and weaknesses? And now let me sort of decide for myself on the basis of what I've seen, that what is the sort of a track that is best suited to my personality. So, but I'm so glad. I mean, you did speak about the fact that, we don't focus enough on self-discovery and career exploration. I'm so glad that you're doing that as a venture, because I think this is something that we desperately need. I mean, a big reason probably why when we interact with our friends and they're probably not very happy with what they're doing at a given point of time is this, that because, nobody has sort of, guided them in the process to be able to understand what they want. I mean, it's been such, like in India, it's always such a problem, right? I mean, it's this herd mentality that's prevalent, that, if XYZ is doing it, so my child also has to do this. If this is paying well, then, my child is headed there. So I'm so glad that, at Eduworks, you're actually first doing this extensive process where you're doing this comprehensive evaluation, a mind map, and then sort of figuring out that, okay, you work with them individually, and then figure out that, okay, what are the sort of universities, what are the sort of career tracks that they should look at. I think it's been absolutely wonderful to converse with you, Sanskriti. And there's so much, I think, there's so much valuable inputs and advice that you've shared with me. And I'm sure there's so much benefit and so many things that I think my viewers are going back to reflect on and sleep on. And I really think that's a big difference that you and your venture are making. And I really wish that we have more committed people like you who are part of this process, which actually helps making the lives of so many students a lot easier. Thank you so much for joining us and taking out the time and being with us this evening.
Thank you, Kritika. I really enjoyed being here. I hope that your audience actually, benefited from this.
I'm sure they did. And like Sanskriti said, guys, you guys can check them out. They're all available on social media. They have a great Instagram handle called Eduworks India. So go check them out. Go and see the amazing work that they're doing. And I'm sure you can DM them to get in touch with them and take the conversation forward. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you again next week. Thank you so much, Sanskriti. And kudos to you and Eduworks for the amazing work that you guys are doing. And to all my viewers, stay safe, everybody, mask up, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.